Hello there, Craven. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. Yourself?
I'm doing well. Yeah, I'm doing well. I mean, here in the UK, we're gradually coming out of our lockdown, which just seems to be going on forever. So I'm feeling slightly better, slightly more optimistic now.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah. Well, whereabouts are you based again?
I'm in Cape Town.
You're in Cape Town. Okay.
Our facilities in Hanover Park that we're working from. But I'm currently at Strandfontein at one of my halfway houses where guys are in recovery programs.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. In terms of like your COVID laws and stuff, how is it going with the restrictions? Is it easing off now at the moment, or is it tougher over there?
But the lockdown, I think we're in level 2 now. So it's relatively okay.
Okay.
We can be out till about 11 o'clock and can be 100 people gathering together. And so, that makes it doable.
Oh, that's amazing. First of all, welcome to LetsDoHumans podcast. Obviously, I'm Francis Jamra. Okay. Sorry about that. So I was just giving you my whole life story and then it cut off.
I caught most of it.
Oh, you caught most of it. Okay, yeah. So I was just talking about regards to what I do and why I got you on here. And the reason why I wanted to speak to someone that was doing work within the community in South Africa is because, I mean, for me personally, South Africa is a very interesting case study. So you have all the historics that we're well aware of, apartheid and so forth. But recently I came across an image which kind of got me thinking more about what is that's happening on the ground in regards to like violence and everything else that's going on in South Africa. So I came across this image which showed a split of Strand and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, and Nomzama. Yeah, so I saw this image and it showed two various neighborhoods that was only split by a couple of meters, but on one side you had a township of extreme poverty, and then on one side you had the affluence of the white community within that area. So I'm sure you're aware of, the split between Strand and Nomzama. So I just wanted to know, in regards to like current state of South Africa, because when you look at a lot of like the indexes of crime, it's always very high globally, but then within Africa it's also extremely high. So I was trying to get a deeper understanding as to what is that's actually happening on the ground that's perpetuating this violence.
Yeah, no, look, we work within that culture where we are trying to sort of reduce violent crimes of happening. And we've designed what we call a group of guys called the interrupters. They have become first responders in regards to looking at how do we as community reduce violence, because the normal law component has not been able to really assist us in reducing violent crimes within our communities. So a lot of people would think the whole Cape Town or South Africa is violent, but it's not like that. It's certain segments of Cape Town that has become very violent, very hostile. Like I live in an area which is called Hanover Park, Menenberg. You can Google it to Nyanga. So it's called the Nyanga cluster. So the Nyanga cluster is basically responsible for almost 80% of the murder rate that happens in Cape Town. But once the data and the stats goes through, it shows that Cape Town is a murder capital of South Africa. But then again, that is a small portion. If I look at the radius of that area, it could be easier, radius of maybe 15 kilometers, 20 kilometers in radius, that the whole cluster could be up to 25 for the most. But yet it then represents the whole of Cape Town. So what we've done over the years is we've designed specialized programs to target the high-risk communities. And we train and develop young people or ex-offenders, ex-gang members, to come alongside with us. We train them and we sort of take them through a model of epidemiology. And we train them as public health professionals how to stop the violence at the front end. So these young men understand violence. They come from the culture. They obviously were part of the urban displacement, their parents. So they were dumped in the culture of violence. There would be situational crime, institutional crime, or social crime. So they were dumped in one of those pockets. And they grew to understand violence as normal. So now you've got this group that takes violence as a normal behavior, and you've got to train them to say violence is abnormal. And we want to train and develop you as an interrupter, sort of to look at how do you make a change and a difference in your community. So these young guys and ladies, obviously, there's females as well that get trained as interrupters. So they were ex-offenders, ex-gang members. So these people are now acting on the front line as credible messengers. And they are the first responders. And they sort of look at who is the transporters of violence, people that they see as just like them. A couple of years ago, that was them. So they can view those guys through a better lens. And they would then forge a relationship with them. They would then offer them, I would say, exit programs out of a violent lifestyle, out of gangs. They would then do a risk reduction with them, work with the families, and spend up to 4 months with them. That is when they sort of quarantine the transport of violence.
So in regards to the initiative that you do with the interrupters, is that government funded as well, or is that just all independent money?
Yeah, currently it's all independent. In the beginning, it was government funded because obviously we did all the research and the baselines via government, and we installed a lot of devices within high-risk areas so that we can manage violent crimes in real time. So we had what we call gunfire detection systems.
Okay.
In an area where there was more than about 10 murders per 100,000 people. So we could easily have about 60 murders per 100,000 people. Wow. In an area where there's about 55,000, you put two areas together, you get about 60 to 80 murders between those two areas, which is quite a lot. Because if you have 6 murders per 100,000, it's already a red flag. So what we've done in those areas, we've installed what we call gunfire detection systems. And these gunfire detection systems then sends us an alert when there's gunfire in the area. We'll pick up one gunfire, multiple gunfire. It then distinguishes what kind of weapon gets used. And in about 2 to 3 seconds, all my interrupters gets an alert on their phones with GPS location where the gunfire is happening. So their job is to respond to that incident ASAP. So between 3 and 7 seconds, they get the alert. I want them on the scene in the next 3 to 7 minutes.
Amazing.
So they need to go out there and stop the retaliation and see if they can intervene in the conflict. But what puts them on the front end of the violence is they also have devices on their phones. On their phones, they do a lot of work where they do contact logs, violence interrupter logs, outreach case notes. So they basically know the whole community and they know all the high-risk guys in the area via the baseline they've done prior to us actually launching the program. So when the gunfire goes off, they will know who the shooter is in that particular area, what gang is in that particular area, and who the guy is that disposes weapons in the area. So they will then go immediately to the scene, knowing exactly who's involved with the violence. And the only thing they need to find out is what is the violence all about. If it's historic violence, if it was a robbery, if it was drug-related, if it was family-related, if there's a girlfriend involved. And once they've desegmented what the violence is all about, they immediately start with conflict mediation between the gangs. And they would actually then get the gangs together maybe the following day or 3 days after. But on site, they would immediately do what we call interrupters responding. So they will respond to the hospital if a guy got shot. They will respond to the family if the family is going to get involved. So these guys work in a group of about 4 to 5 at a time, but there's only 16 interrupters per area. So which means they're very thinly spread. But because these guys are smart and they're streetwise, you don't need to teach them anything about gang violence. The only thing you need to teach them is how an epidemic works and how violence transports similar to a disease. So now that they understand it, they then respond. And by 7 minutes, in real time, all this information is on my laptop. I can then sit somewhere in my office. I can sit in my car. I can be traveling. And then I will work out the game plan for the interrupters, what to do next. Because I will then have overview of what all the interrupters say about the violence, about the gang, about the transporter, the shooter, And I would then send out outreach workers. Outreach workers is a different kind of a worker. He's the worker that offers you an exit program. He's a worker that look at what is the needs. What is the reason why you're shooting? How did you get involved in the gangs? So he looks at all of those issues and he then develops a plan, another game plan for the individual. Because everybody is not violent by nature. Violence is what we call, there's two processes happening. There's interruption happening. Guys, we call them, they do public education. They would educate the public in regards to what's happening in the area, why it's happening, so that no false rumors goes across the borderlines. Other gangs hear a different story. And then you get another level of guys, they then make contact with gang bosses. Immediately they make contact with different gang bosses. They also type of interrupter and they alert the gang boss of what the incident is all about. Sometimes it's very small. Sometimes it's a robbery that goes sour. A gang member wants to rob somebody and it goes sour. He shoots the wrong person and those people want to retaliate. So then the group then interrupt that whole process and runs on mediation. Sometimes on-site or sometimes off-site. But the bottom line is here, the gang bosses must be, that we must involve them to say, look, there's
on board the whole process.
In the area. Because they sometimes are unaware. And gang members would tell them, spin them a different story. And they would assign maybe more weapons. So our proactive way then helps that weapons don't get assigned for the wrong reason. And I mean, we will stop then gang wars at the front end. So then we deal with an incident and not an actual gang war. And that automatically reduces the violence simultaneously.
In terms of like, you know, because obviously from my understanding is that there's a massive distrust between the law enforcement and local communities within these particular communities where violence is rife. What do you see is the major issue between the disconnect? What is the disconnect between the law enforcement and the community?
I think the disconnect is because a lot of law enforcement officials is very involved with gangs. You know, they're very involved in the monitoring thing with gangs. So there's a segment of gangs that obviously makes a lot of money via drugs. And a lot of these law enforcement agencies, they end up on the payroll of the gangs. So for communities to then work through law enforcement is wasting a lot of time because some of these police stations that are situated in high-risk communities, 70% of the police guys you can't trust. Look, I do surveys there. And I would then ask the community, I would also ask the gang, what policeman can I trust if I go to the police station to do a case? The gang would say, look, those 7 there, they fall in our pocket. The other 3 there, we're struggling to get them on board. But you can basically trust only the 3 officials. How do we know that? Because many times we do conflict mediations, we would sit in the gang houses to go and do the mediation. While we're sitting there, we will then see how the different law enforcement agencies come and collect their money at the gang house.
We actively see them collecting the money from the gangs.
No, we physically see that. We sort of, when we see the law enforcement coming, we take a back step, you know, because we don't want to be in their business. Because our thing is about trust and credibility with the gangs. But out of all this, we collect a lot of analytical data in real time in regards to what's happening. So law enforcement is not interested in data like that. They've got no interest in data.
Surprising.
And because the data will then will narrow their response time, and they don't want to respond within 7 minutes. They want to respond 15 minutes later, or at least a half an hour later when violence is already toned down or it has escalated. But most of these guys are on payroll. The other thing with law enforcement is that, you know, they sell the docket, the arrest docket. But there's always a price tag on an arrest docket. So if a guy gets arrested at the front end, the first officer would maybe, he would sell it for 500 to 1,000 rand. When it goes to court, it could easily cost him 3,000 rand. When it's in the hand of a magistrate, it could cost him 10,000. So what they've done over many years, they have designed a little system where they can buy the docket right at the front end, even before it gets to court. So now communities is quite aware of that. So for them to lay a case, for them to go to the police and trust them, it's basically they feel it's a waste of time. I mean, I physically have seen this happening with my own eyes.
Wow.
Where we're trying to get the shooter off a ground. He was on a premises where there was a service happening, and then our systems located the weapon on the ground, and we said, look, weapon live on the ground, and we linked to our system, and look, get some enforcement guys to remove the weapon from the ground. The weapon was removed. The woman was arrested that kept the weapon for the gang. The woman was the next day released. I spoke to the gang member. I said, what kind of a guy let his mother go to prison? He said, no, my mother's not in prison. My mother's at home. I said, but she was arrested with your weapon in her bag. She kept it for you at the service, a funeral service. He says, yeah, those are things we do, because we felt unsafe at that particular service. Yeah. And the next day he comes back to me, he's got the docket in his hand, and he's got his weapon back.
Wow.
That was taken by the police. That's next day. So for me, as a community member, if I had to be just a normal community member, I would not go and report that guy. Because I know that guy will be out tomorrow and he will have his weapon back.
His weapon, yeah.
So it would scare me as a normal community member to go and file a case against this individual. I would rather not get involved and let the law enforcement do their job, those that can do it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you saw in 2014, a law enforcement official, SAPS official, South African police guy, he sold over 2,500 guns.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah,
in our community, which we call the Nyanga cluster. Yeah, he was released this year. He got the 18-year sentence in 2014, but he was released this year. That law enforcement guy.
So he done what, 6 years?
Whether he changed his ways, I don't know. He has done about 6 years, but he's back out on the street.
Yeah.
But you know how many people died on account of the weapons he sold to the gangs? So he's out on the street because he's not responsible for the people that died. But I mean, if you look at it physically, he's responsible. He's selling those weapons to the gang members. But that also was on our data because the gangs called us in and started complaining about, this gang bought 30 guns, this gang bought 40 guns. Why are they buying so many guns? And they call us in. And we now need to negotiate and say, guys, I don't understand. Gangsters buy guns. But they say there's no war. There's nothing happening. There's no gang conflict. Why are they buying guns? And then all of them started buying weapons sort of to protect themselves. And actually, a year later, 2 years later, a big gang conflict broke out. And I mean, hundreds of guys died because of the weapons they had. They had access to all these weapons.
Yeah. And these are weapons that were being supplied by the police. But if it was to go back to the core of it, what is, from your evidence being on the ground, what do you think is the origins of this violence, especially within these pockets of certain communities?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that contribute, but the first contributor obviously is the urban displacement.
Yeah.
I mean, I think uprooting people from where they were living. They were living in Cape Town, in Upper Cape Town, and in Claremont and in Kenilworth, which was very beautiful areas. So that uprooting and placing all these people in a concrete jungle, and I mean, you got in a square meter of 100 a block. They've got a block of flats, so 100 square meters, and you've got 60 families living there, and that's the way they would design it. I don't know if you probably know about the apartheid, but obviously I don't call it apartheid, I call it the urban displacement. So that was the first contributor. And the next contributor, obviously, was that the fact that there was no recreational plan designed there. There was no infrastructure, economic infrastructure there. So poverty started, at a very early stage when these people was all displaced. And the gangs, obviously, they just started to design a way that you could say, okay, how do we survive? How do we make money? How do we feed our families? And they started with these small cultures of selling a little bit of marijuana, selling cigarettes, selling alcohol. And this later grew into this big drug hub that became the economic hub of our high-risk communities. And a lot of people became dependent on truckloads and their businesses. So they became the infrastructure of finance coming in to the community and going out of the community, and a typology of livelihood. So poverty is a big problem. Drugs is a big problem. But your entry level is, if you look at, we call it the situational crime. Nothing has yet been done to upgrade these areas so that people can try to live a better life, because it's built, and the hotspots for gang violence to grow, for crime to grow, it's built in that manner. I mean, I do a little bit of urban designing and urban planning with the city at that time. And I told them, this place was designed for these young men to, it creates crime by itself.
Yeah.
So nothing has been done there. The lighting in the areas is just as bad. So that one segment of urban displacement and situational crime is just escalating all the time. It's just growing all the time. The other one is institutional crime. You know, in those communities, a lot of petty crimes happened when it started out, you know, with urban displacement. But all these guys were incarcerated for having a little bit of marijuana. But that time, the incarceration was, you could get 10 years for having marijuana on you. Yeah. You could get 10 years for having amphetamine on you. You get 10 years for stabbing somebody. Today, it's different, because we have about 41,000 awaiting trial prisoners. Wow. And we only have space for 11,000 to sleep. So a cell that takes 30 people takes 120 at a time. Yeah. Thus, they don't process the guys. And our prosecution rate is about 3%. Wow. The successful prosecution rate is about 3% for the most. So now you've got all these guys floating around. Already has committed crime, already has gone through the system of incarceration, but has popped out at the back end a few days later, maybe a year later, 2 years later, but there has not been rehabilitated. So the restorative side of them being incarcerated has not added value. So institutionally, crime is also being created against the communities, because the guys get taken out, but they come back. So they come back with all these different stars on their shoulders. They got the number system that they've acquired. So they are now better gangsters. They are now more qualified gangsters. They've got like a degree in gangsterism. And now they come back and they expect that respect to come their way. But the communities don't understand what prison has done to them. So there's no restorative, I would say, value added when guys are incarcerated. So situational crime continues, institutional crime continues, and that now, all of that just puts the bulk of the crime on social crime. So now you get all the social issues happening. Now you get all the gender-based violence happening, and it's all linked with the fact that unemployment, it's now about 30, I think that's about 38%.
Yeah, I think I checked recently. I think it was about 40%
unemployment.
Yeah,
it's going to 40%.
Yeah, and I was looking at something interesting. Prior to speaking to you, I was doing my readings and my studies into, like, you know, the geographics of South Africa in particular, and I realized something quite interesting, that violence tends to be quite prevalent in areas where there's relative poverty. So you would have a community of extreme poverty in one end that's deprived of all of the wealth within the community, and then right next door you have affluency. So it's like you look outside your window and almost see all the beauty in the world, but you have none of it. And I realized that when you take that same principle across the world and you look at areas where relative poverty is very high, where communities of affluence and poverty are right next door to each other, you get extreme violence within the poor communities. Because what you tend to find is that young men in those poor communities are now looking for social status that matches that of the affluent community. And then they start looking for it within their communities by, you know, committing acts of violence, you know, serious rape and kidnapping, murder and so forth, in order to gain that respect that they see other affluent people getting. Do you think that plays a part? Like, how the geographical structure of South Africa is at the moment?
Exactly, that plays a part, because they're constantly competing with that other affluent area, and that's where they want to be. But the resources is so limited within their own community And like you said, there's a road that separates some of these communities. So I'm working in Hanover Park, which is infected with gang violence. So I've got my team deployed there. Then the road separates us, and then you get the area called Penati Estate. No violence, no murder there. It's physically a road separating them. But they've got single dwelling homes. It's a 3-bedroom home. There's home water in there. And obviously, those people, most of them are working. So most of those families in that side of the fence are working. This side of the fence, you get out of 10 families, only 6 of them can afford, to sustain their children. And you got the other 4 families that cannot sustain, and income generating processes that happens via the gangs. So drugs has become, but yet most of the drug gets sold to their own people. It's not that thick anymore. And a lot of these young, they become, so substance is beginning to level the income generating and sustainable livelihood, then you see there's this big difference. So always trying to match up to that, at least have a job. Now, in our program, we obviously recruit a lot of high-risk guys. The first thing they would ask you is not that you must help them to get off the drugs. The first thing they would ask you, hey guys, can you help me find a job? I said, look, you'll have to go through a job readiness program. You first have to come off the drugs. I first need to sort out your identification and social card. Once that is sorted out, take me a couple of months, 3 months, join the program. We bring them to an in-house program. It's a halfway house. It's on the coast in Falsbeck Coast, which is a better environment. Actually, no, zero violence this side. We bring them here. They wake up in the morning, they see the coastline. Wake up in the morning, they inhale fresh air. 3 months later, this guy is reintegrated. He's got a job. I now have 33 guys in the last 3 months that I gave a job that comes out of the Irish community. They are now starting to support their families. So the whole dynamic of them being transporters of violence, crime, has changed over 3 months. So that is how simple it is. You just change the borderline. So now, investment happening, and it all stops at the borderline of high-risk community for government departments to come and work there, to do investment there, and to uplift the infrastructure of the areas. But yet we have programs like ourselves. They say, look, you can come in an area, your safety is basically guaranteed. We have now one of the most violent areas in Hanover Park, in Cape Town, is now a tourist attraction.
Oh, wow,
So
amazing.
the tourists are coming. They're coming 10, 12 at a time, little bus. They stop at our office, they look at all our devices, technology we're using, the way we do data, they meet all our people. They look at the feeding program, we take them through the community. They meet actual gangsters, they meet actual shooters. They say, look, that's just normal people. It's just that the situation is aggravated against them, and that's why they act out. But on a normal day, with you coming here, with me coming here, nothing is happening. And these tourists can't understand. And they say, like, Craven, look, we need to really speak to your government. I said, look, you must have the political will to end stuff like this,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
at this time, they don't have it yet.
Yeah, that's the thing, because I mean, it's always in the interest of those who hold power to keep those who are descendants of a particular culture or a particular group in the position that they're in. And that's the sad part about it, because it is as simple as offering people opportunities and giving them opportunities so that they feel like they have a sense of purpose. Because one thing I realized about human beings, when we don't have a sense of purpose, that's when we can easily fall into that pit hole of life where we fall into violence and we fall into depression and all these other things and addiction, because we don't have no sense of purpose. We don't know how to feed ourselves, and we don't have the opportunities to feed our families. And no man in particular, because obviously most of the violence comes from men, no man in particular wants to go home to a household where they're unable to provide for. And if you're in that environment, you're going to end up going into violence. So on your end, is there any lobbying or is there any push for more governmental like initiative and action?
Yeah, I'm currently, that's why I just got back today. I was in whole day meetings with different government departments because they've asked me to get back involved with the gunfire detection, monitoring and evaluation of where the hostile areas are and how I can deploy some of my team to stop the violence at the front end. So we're basically looking at this year rolling out one of our programs again, but it needs 5 pillars, you know. Our programs, and it's based on public health and epidemiology. So I can start the program today, and end of the year there's no funding. I must stop the program. It doesn't work. Our programs don't work like that. So if I start it out and I roll it out, I need to have interrupters. I need to have outreach workers. I need to identify and detect crime. I need to interrupt the crime, alter the behavior of the masses. I need to do a database in regards to managing this whole thing as to how and who is the guys that we need to help. Once that thing is in place, this program reduces violence with 43% over 2 years. And it's scientifically proven. So we're busy looking at that. How to roll out this program, I would say 100% again, because it's operating on about 20%. And if it does up more. But you can't process these guys. So gang members, you don't want them to change their behavior or exit the gang when you don't have the resources to process them. You cannot ask a guy to change his life. And this livelihood that is got now in the gang currently, there's some.
Sorry, cut off again.
Yeah, this is a problem, you know, with
I know,
with load shedding.
No, it's absolutely
fine. That makes everything unstable,
Yeah. So I'm just going to ask you a couple more questions anyway, because I know it keeps on cutting off and you're probably a busy man. So one of the, oops, so now my one's cut off. Can you see me now?
I can see now,
Yeah. What is the root cause of like the gender-based violence? Because that's been a major point of concern when it comes to violence in those particular areas. Why is there such a big emphasis on gender violence, and why are people so violent to females in particular in these areas?
Yeah, you know, the male species, like I said now, he's lost his ability to protect, to provide, you know, and that is one of the key issues why they become so violent, because they are placed on a certain end where they cannot provide and they cannot protect their families. There isn't jobs for them, and there is this pressure that comes from families that they need to be protected, they need to be provided for, you know, and they need to be trained as individuals, and men cannot live up to that because there is not an income stream for them. And then the earth, this side where we are, you know, they sort of place a lot on the male species that they cannot deliver. And the minute they go to the other side where there is income generated, is the wrong way. So when we look at the gender-based violence, it's a lot about men not being able to provide for their families, and then they sort of act out in a serious way. that, they try to suppress and oppress women, not to speak back to them and not to speak against them. And they use it in a very violent way. And because women obviously is a bit weaker, so this, if we look now what happened during the lockdown, we found that there was a ban on alcohol. There was an alcohol ban. And people said that, the death rate will be less because accidents will be less. But then domestic violence was worse because there was a lockdown on alcohol. So alcohol was still available, but at 10 times the price.
Wow.
So an average guy would maybe spend, he earns about 1,000 Rand a week, and he spends 300 Rand on alcohol. Now he had to spend the whole 1,000 Rand on alcohol because the bottle of whiskey that he could buy for 300 is now costing him 1,000 Rand. Because they put a ban on alcohol, but the alcohol was still available.
Yeah.
So the domestic violence during lockdown has actually doubled because men has become more frustrated, more violent, because now they're coming home without money. And and they're buying one bottle of alcohol for their own pleasures, and people are saying that there was less accidents, but the accidents in the houses and in the families was worse because of banning alcohol and then banning it, but it's still available. Because you look at drugs, it's freely available. So imagine you can actually ban alcohol. It's impossible. These guys will still find a way to get the alcohol, but now they're selling it at maybe 10 times the price. And then you could see that alcohol plays an important role in domestic violence. It plays a serious role in domestic violence. And then obviously substance abuse also plays, various drugs plays a serious role in domestic violence. And the fact that men can't provide, that puts them in limp mode already. And they become aggressive because they cannot provide. We have noticed, we can show you data of men that has become income generators and providers. The whole violence in that particular family has also cooled down. The violence in that street has cooled down because these men have now become providers. And out of that, they've got a little bit of money for themselves, they've got for their families, and they can also compete with the guy opposite the road and start to live a normal life. But there's so much contributors, The other issue about violence, if we go into the brain, we'll find out that a lot of men are already hot-wired since early days. Even prior to the urban displacement, the brain of a lot of men during the time of slavery has been changed. He's been changed, into a fight mode. Not some of them take the flight mode, but a lot of them take the fight mode, and their brains are so hot wired, the amygdala. You'll find out that a lot of guys, when you interview them, look, I live with them. I live with perpetrators of violence. I've got a facility where I've got access to 40 of them every day. I can interview, I can ask, what's the reason, this and that. And these guys would answer, look, I sometimes don't know why I'm so angry. I'm just angry because I cannot provide for my family, but they are looking for me to provide. And I looked at my own life a couple of years ago when provision became a problem. I became a bit angry. It's like, why can't I provide for my family? What's happening to me? And then that hot button, that anger neuron in my brain, I sort of switched on, because I just felt indeed that I need to provide and I can't. So what the urban displacement has done already to a lot of men, it has pretty crippled them. And today the expectation is that men must just alter their behavior, especially in our communities. They would just expect that men must just change. We're running a program now with about 50 men, and 33 of them is with me. It's called a men's program. So they sort of stay with me and work with me for the next, I would say, 5 months. And if you look at the change in these guys' behaviors, just because they're in the income stream, they are part of a group that they feel we belong. And this is not a gang. This is now a community group that works in the community, that earns money, take that little bit of a livelihood back to their families. But yet they are a little bit angry. So they also go through anger management. They go through a program we call paradigm shifts. They go through different goal settings, a lot of stuff that as men they've missed out on. So all of that programs is designed to alter the behavior of that man, that he can understand, that he does not need to be as violent as he is. And but if you look, you can go through it that in our Irish communities, 80% of the men is just angry. They're just angry, and some of them don't know the reason why they are as angry as they are. And then it just rolls over into their families. And we are not talking about only gang men that belongs to gang, or men that is involved with drugs. We are looking at a normal guy that's got the 9-to-5 job, but still is becoming a perpetrator of domestic violence. And there's a 50-50 when it comes to domestic violence of a normal 9-to-5 guy and then a high-risk guy living on the streets. And one of my programs, if I recruit guys, gang members, and I recruit them, I go through the different gangs and I tell them, look, this guy's going to work for me. He's got this on his record, that on his record. He comes out of prison. He was incarcerated for 10 years. The gang said, no, fine, Pastor. This guy can work for you. We respect him. He's done his time. He served his time, and he wants to make a change in the community. They respect him. I bring them a guy who's got violence against women and children on his record. The gangs would say, nope.
You're
not going to bring that guy to us. So they even reject a man that perpetrates against women and children, even gangs. So we could never employ any guy who had that on his criminal record. Now, can you imagine that if gang members don't respect a man like that, then that is not something that they promote. They don't promote violence against women.
You kind of see that across in the prison systems as well, globally. Anywhere you go in the world, you can have, serial killers in there. But as soon as you bring like a child molester or, someone who abused a woman in there, then it's a wrap. They all ostracize him, or they're willing to kill him to an extent, to the worst of extremes. You know what I mean? When you hear all of these stories and you look at it, it feels like the nation hasn't actually dealt with its historic trauma as well. It seems to be a lot of historical trauma. Yeah, and that is a devastating factor because it's so deeply engraved. And you had the generation that experienced it, the displacement firsthand. You had the generation that was born from it. You had the generation that are now born more children from the back end of it. And it seems to be like a never-ending cycle of trauma which hasn't been dealt with. And it's a very deep subject. And it's almost, how do you deal with that on such a wide scale when it's affected so many people and so deeply engraved? Because unless there is like a massive systemic change that then enables people access to all of these riches and opportunities and simple things like employment, it's going to be very hard to deal with stuff on a micro to make a larger change. Do you see what I mean? Yeah, and it's
no, we started with a program, so it's actually going out into schools and training young men, to tone down their violent behavior. So we have already dropped this to a very young age, and we're working on high schools and even primary schools to teach young men that violence is abnormal. You cannot have a violent nature, and you need to de-learn that. You need to unlearn that. So we are starting already at a young age to teach men to unlearn that violent nature, because they might figure, no, it's just temporary. The bullying and the way they speak is temporary, but what they don't know, it actually grows with them. So we are teaching them to park it already at a young age. And I think that will be the mass mobilization that we are busy with, especially with men, trying to teach them that, violence and anger, they don't need that in their life as a man. They can be men in more ways than acting out in violence and oppressing women and oppressing children and other community members. So it's a long road, but yet we need to acknowledge that somewhere this thing has gone wrong. And nobody has dealt with the trauma. So that program is zoomed in on the trauma that men are suffering or have suffered, and now it's become a generational thing. So I think in the next 20 years we might see some dent in this cycle, that men are seeing themselves differently now, and they believe that they can, without violence, without oppression, still be seen as a man.
Yeah, that's amazing. And obviously we need more people like yourself who are actually doing the groundwork and who actually understand these communities and know how to deal with them. Because sometimes you have a system that's trying to deal with a community that they don't understand, and you get that wherever you are. You know what I mean? So like, you know, here I've got friends who are doing amazing stuff within the community. I've got a friend called Say. She works with, like, you know, young kids in Mentivity. We've got United Borders, and I know various people that are dealing with communities and people directly. And because they understand these communities, they end up getting real life results. When sometimes when you have the system or the government coming into these communities trying to do something, it's more like a bulldozer method, or, you know, because I don't understand it, I'm just going to grab everybody and treat everybody absolutely the same, when really and truly there are deep-rooted issues that only those within the community understand. In terms of your organization, how do people go about supporting your organization?
Yeah, we've got a little Facebook and our websites where we reach out to people to support us, you know. So we've put it out there, and then actually in England we've got some support from a nice the Treasure Foundation in England, and also the one of the Methodist churches that has sort of come alongside us to support one of our facilities here in Cape Town that is helping young men to alter their behaviors. But these young men stay in house for up to 3 months with us while we helping them to sort of change their behavior. So we reach out to people for support all over, you know, where we can. Locally, it's a bit difficult to get support from local government institutions. And even now during COVID for the last year and a half, it's been difficult for so many people to really support other entities and organizations like ourselves. But we continuously reach out to people to say, look, and even if you support one individual that reaches out and you support them from the other side, you know, like Treasure Foundation has done, they supported 15 individuals this year.
Amazing.
And the qualitative data we've shown to them now is that 13 of the young men are working today. 13 of the young men has reintegrated. It is 3-4 months later. So their investment has become a quality investment that that families, that community will definitely see the difference of their investment by supporting those guys to stay in one of our facilities for the 3 months. So there's many ways we can invest. Sometimes people are thinking of, you know, it's going to cost a lot of a lot of money. But sometimes you invest in one person, the transporter of violence or the transporter of the degradation of that particular family. When that behavior is altered, the whole family is saved. And you can cut off the generational transfer of violence, because if I'm a violent man, I'm going to raise my children in a violent way. I'm going to discipline them in a violent way. And that obviously then will transport to them. And they will just continue and think it's right for me. Like we've got a method. We don't believe in capital punishment. We don't believe in beating our people or our children or our grandchildren. We understand that everything can be negotiated, can be mediated, conflict can be resolved with words and actions that's positive. And we, in the last, I think it is the last, we started this project in the year 2002. And the result we've seen is phenomenal. It's phenomenal result we've seen. And for some years, there was no support that we could actually depend on getting some funds. But we have taught many community members, look, the change will happen from within. And the money is inside of you. You got to reach inside and like, hey, what you talking? I don't even have a bread to eat. The money is inside. Yet, let alone one of the facilities was built in the most impoverished communities, was built by that community. Today, it's just how many years later? It's about 18 years later. The people are still amazed that out of their poverty situation, they have actually built an institution that today are saving many people alive. They still stand back and say, did we really build this institution? They can't believe it. But sometimes you need to empower people that there's some stuff inside of them. And then reaching out today, because the thing has grown quite big. So it's difficult to fund it, you know, from within. But yet the start was made. And we reach out to people via social media in regards to supporting the initiative and to supporting individuals and to supporting maybe just a project. So someone has now also in England that supported just the project. And we have shown her now 4 months, 4 weeks ago, She supported the project of getting a family, a single mother and a daughter, sorted out, getting them into a dwelling, a house. And that's 4 weeks later, the house has been built. And the family is moving in in the next 2 weeks. The family will be moving in. And this is a woman that actually works in the community, sacrificed her livelihood to serve the community, but never had a home of her own. Always been living in halfway houses and I would say places of refuge. But today she's going to move into her own house in the next 2 weeks because somebody out there has found it good to invest in that individual. So we, as an organization, we got nothing, but an individual was built up, and that individual will now build up other people by saying these things are possible. There is people out there that want to help.
It's a ricochet effect, and that's how it works, and that's amazing. I'm definitely gonna. I mean, afterwards, I want you to send me all the details regarding the organization, so I can, encourage my viewers and listeners to do whatever they can, get in touch, and if they want to contribute, which would be amazing. So when I always wanted to come to South Africa anyway. So after COVID and everything else settles down, I would love to come down and check out the facilities and everything that you're doing right now. Because right now it's near enough.
Definitely, you must come.
Yeah, no, most definitely. I heard you mention the church. Are you ordained reverend by any chance?
Yes, I'm a reverend as well. Yes, okay. I've got the church. Also in the middle of Gangland, I've got a church.
Okay.
And at the back of that church, there's also a fully fledged resource center.
Yeah.
That serves the community. Actually, it feeds about 800 people every day.
Oh wow!
Every God-given day, that feeds 800 people. It sees about 50 to 60 young people, helping them with CVs, and it does some youth development, and it also allows us this side to manage a garden, a organic feeding garden.
Yeah.
But it started out from that facility and now today own vegetables as well. And the beauty it is running the facility, managing these facilities for us and on behalf of us. Yeah. And we can stand back with a smile and say, look, everything is doing. I actually have a parolee, parolee managing my finances today. It's currently on parole. looking at the admin and the money. I always tell my wife, hey, you got to just double check on him every time. But not in a bad way.
Yeah.
But he's doing so well. It's unbelievable. We never even had a human resource person that manages our administration in that way.
Yeah.
And today he's doing it. So adding value to that man's life. Today his father and his family is rebuilt. And things have cooled down around him, I mean, there's quite a few parolees that we've helped like that. Just restoring human dignity. That is, to us, the baseline. Restoring human dignity in the lives of men and women and allowing them to do the same to their children one day. And it's happening, and the evidence is there. So if you come out to Cape Town soon,
yeah, no, definitely.
They allow you guys to fly very soon.
Yeah, hopefully. That'd be amazing. The reason why I asked because both my parents are actually ordained pastors as well. Both my parents. My dad's a reverend. My mom's a reverend as well.
Okay.
So I understand the work that and I'm a firm believer that the church should always be a part of the community and should always be a major contributor of the community because ideally that's what it stands for. To be a Christian and to be Christ-like is to sacrifice and to give to those less than in need. So it's wonderful that you said that you've done all of those stuff through the church. Yeah. Because that was going to be my next question, but it's already great to hear that you're already doing it. So that's fantastic.
No, it actually started out in the church. The whole operation started from the church. Today it has grown into multiple NGOs that is now doing the work. But the bulk of it started out of the church where I was the ordained minister. And so the church is open 7 days a week. You don't find the place closed. It's open 7 days a week. The halfway house we're running is open basically 24/7. So people knock at this door at any time. I don't like it, but you get the knock at the door 3 o'clock in the morning. A wet guy standing outside, he was rain wet and is looking for some help. And you don't always want that to happen. But when it happens, the facility is there to accommodate and to help that individual. Obviously, there's processes in place, but I would say that we've managed now to start from a church and today having a 24/7 operation running and not being funded. The one that I'm running here is also self-funded. And it's amazing what people can do if you give them an opportunity. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's beautiful to hear. Well, Craven, it's an absolute pleasure to hear from you and to hear your story and the great work that you're doing. And I mean, I'm gonna be a great representative of. I'm gonna represent your work wherever I go, and encourage people to check out the work that you do, and encourage them to whether they can donate or get in touch in whatever way possible to do so. I will do once I get the contact details myself. But it's an absolute pleasure, and definitely I look forward to meeting you one day in person when we do get a chance to travel, and I do come down to Cape Town and see the project that you're running. Yeah.
Lovely. Yeah, looking forward to meet you in person one day.
Yeah.